Okay everyone, welcome back to a new semester in a new course. As you all know, this course is, as its title suggests, it's ontology. And whenever we speak of ontology, the first question which comes to our mind is, what exactly is ontology? So, ontology is a Greek term which is formed out of two words, on and logia, where on means being and logia means science of or the study of. So ontology means the study of being or the science of being. It includes everything which can be studied about being. For instance, let me take an example. Suppose one of you say goes to a restaurant and you were about to sit near a table, and then suddenly you decided to sit near some other table because you found it looking different, or you found that space interesting, or whatever it is. You change your table, then you sit there. Some waiter brings the menu to you, and you see the menu, look at the items, choose a few of them, order them, eat, pay the bill, and go. This is what happens usually in a restaurant, right? Now, in even such a seemingly simple scenario, there are so many entities involved. Like, the restaurant itself is an entity, and when you go there, you see something called a table, and then you decided that you have to go sit somewhere else because of that place or location or that table there, its design, its size, shape, whatever it is. These things have influenced your decision to change your place. So there is some concept called space, there is some concept called location, there is some concept called size, weight, entity called table, entity called waiter, entity called menu, and then you pay the bill, there is an entity called bill, you pay using money, there is an entity called money. All these things, there are so many. There are umpteen number of things participating even in such a simple scenario. It's not a simple thing. We take it for granted. We do it seamlessly. We deal with hundreds of entities day in and day out. And we know the features of those entities. We know the qualities of those entities. We know the properties of those entities. And we deal with them day in and day out seamlessly. We take them for granted and we do it effortlessly. So, that does not mean that world is simple. World is a complex thing made up of millions and billions of entities intertwined with each other in complex relations with each other. So, the study of entities as well as the complex relationships between them is ontology, to put it simply. So, ontology, the discipline called ontology, addresses all questions related to being. Like, what is being? What all kinds of beings are there? How many of them are there? And are there any basic beings out of which complex beings have come into being? Or how does something come into being? How does something go out of being? What is being? What is non-being? What is existence? So being and existence are closely related to each other. We call those things which exist to be. So, exist as a verb is also one of the forms of the verb to be. So, to be and being and existence, these are all very closely related with each other. So, when we are saying ontology is the study of being, in other words, it is also the study of all those things which exist. So, it obviously raises all kinds of questions as to what all things exist, how many of them exist, how do they exist, how long do they exist, why do they exist, and in what form do they exist, what causes them to exist, what causes them to not exist. All kinds of things can come as part of this question. All kinds of questions come as part of this discipline. So it's a it addresses a wide range of questions and a wide range of entities. Its domain is very vast. It's like entire reality is its domain, study of reality itself. In other words, ontology is nothing but study of reality itself. Again, but it asks the question, what is reality? It raises these questions. So all these things come together when we are discussing the question of what is ontology. As I mentioned just now, ontology is a Greek term which came from these words on and being. There are cognates. Cognates means equivalent words with similar meanings in other languages. So the cognate for ontology in Indian tradition, there are two words, Padarthashastra or Tattvashastra. Padarthashastra, the word Padartha, when you split it up, it can be split into two words as Pad and Arth. Pada means a word. Artha means what it is striving for, or what it is aspiring for, or what it is referring to. So Padartha means anything which can be referred to by a word. So Padartha Shastra means study of anything which can be referred to by a word or which can be communicated about. Now, this indirectly also implicitly carries a kind of a definition of existence with it. Just earlier we asked what is existence, what all kinds of things exist. Now, if we say Padartha Shastra is the study of all those things which can be referred to by words or which can be communicated about, and that is ontology, or that is the study of things which exist, indirectly we are kind of drawing an equation between Padartha and existence. So, anything which can be referred to by a word or anything which can be communicated about is said to exist. That is the kind of a definition of existence which is implicitly present here. Okay, one can contest the definition, one can differ with that, but nonetheless there are theories which construe entire reality on the basis of such an understanding of existence. Okay, the other word for ontology in Indian tradition is Tattvashastra. Tat in Sanskrit means that. Etat means this, tat means that. So, Tattva means thatness. So, Tattvashastra means the study of the properties of any object which can be referred to as this or that. We are studying the thatness of that object, thatness of any object, which means we are studying the essence of any object. So any entity in this universe, understanding its nature, that is ontology. It is again going back to the kind of understanding of Greek ontology, the study of or the science of being, anything which exists. But here it is also adding something like anything which can be referred to this or that. The study of any such thing is ontology. Okay? So that is another way to put ontology, another way to capture the idea of ontology. Now, these questions, it would not be an exaggeration to say that these questions, like what all kinds of beings are there, how many of them are there, how big is this universe, how vast is this universe, how did we come into being, how did any of these things come into being, how long do they stay, what is the lifespan of myself as well as this universe, all kinds of questions, all these kinds of questions, it would not be an exaggeration to say that there was no place or no time where these questions were not asked. At every point of time, since humans started walking on this earth, these questions were asked at every place. Because it's a natural instinct for beings, living beings, particularly humans, to know where did they come from, to understand this reality, to know the nature of reality. So all the disciplines which we see, they are all in some sense offshoots of these questions. Like physics is about studying physical properties of objects, chemistry is about studying chemical properties of objects, biology is about studying living beings. Now, ontology is studying any property of any being whatsoever. It is to understand beings as such. It is not about this or that property of a being, this being or that being. It is about understanding everything about every being. But you can't understand this question just by, in some sense, it looks empty. Like, being is being. What is there to understand more about it? Unless you get into details of it, like what properties or what facets of being you want to study. Do you want to study its physical properties? Do you want to study its chemical properties? What properties you want to study? That's the question. And then when you start asking those questions, you will start delving deeper into those particular features or properties of that object, and you focus on them. That's how various disciplines have come about. But at a fundamental level, all these are integrated with the basic question as to what is being itself, and how do I understand being? How do I understand any being? That is the basic question, and that's what ontology tries to address. But how do we go about addressing it? We'll see later. Even this seemingly empty question can be addressed in a different way, using a different approach than the approach of physics or chemistry or something like that. There is overlapping, but there is also a difference. And in the process of asking this question, asking all these kinds of questions, one of the fundamental questions, which is the base for all the other questions we have asked so far, is: are there or is there any fundamental constitutional as well as organizational principle or principles out of which this entire gamut of beings have come about? So it's like we see almost infinite number of beings. It's like there is no end to the number of beings which we encounter every day. Every day we can see a new thing, and there is a possibility of encountering a new thing day in and day out. Nowhere we stop and say, okay, I have seen all the things I am supposed to, or I have experienced all the things I am supposed to. Now there is no more new thing that I need to encounter, or that I need to experience, or that I need to know about. This always seems open-ended. So the world, the number of entities in my experience, that seems to be an open-ended thing. There doesn't seem to be any limit to it. So it's like potentially infinite. We don't know whether the number of entities in the universe are actually infinite or not, but at least they're potentially infinite. Even if they're finite, we don't know what that number is. Maybe we can, the more we explore, the more we keep finding more and more new things. It's in that sense potentially infinite. Now, given such a potentially infinite number of things in the universe, are they fundamentally irreducible, or are they fundamentally they constitute themselves, or they are fundamentally constituted of something else? Or have these potentially infinite things come out of some finite number of things, or they are not come out of anything else, they are born themselves? They can't be reduced to anything else, they are irreducible. This is an important question. It's like, think of it like language. Any language has a basic alphabet set, which has some finite number of letters, out of which we construct words, we construct sentences, and these words and sentences are potentially infinite. From a finite alphabet set, we can construct potentially infinite number of words and sentences. Think of reality also like that. Are there any finite alphabet set of entities out of which this seemingly potentially infinite number of entities have come about? So are there any simpler entities out of which the complex entities have come about? Is there a grammar for reality? That's the question. So RK is very closely, fundamentally related to the question of grammar of reality. Does reality also have a grammar of its own, the way language has a grammar of its own? That's the question. So, in the process of asking this question, various people have come up with various theories. And as I mentioned already, it is not an exaggeration to say that there is no point of time or space where these questions have not been asked. So if that is really true, then it is quite possible that there have been millions of people there have been billions of people who thought of reality, out of which millions have come up with some theories, out of which some thousands have survived, some thousands have developed into proper theories, out of which some hundreds have survived and some tens have come into our hands, and we know only a few of them today. So it's something like that. So many people, so much time, so many millions of years, so much time people have thought of these things, and there is a huge variety of answers for this question. What is arche? How many kinds of arches are there? Just for this question, so many people have come with so many answers, as wide as it can get, that is from 0 to infinity. So there are people who said the number of arche, the number of basic primitive units out of which this world is constituted are 0. 2, the number of basic primitive units to be infinity. So there is a range of theories which proposed that arche is 0, 2 arche are infinity. There are infinite of them. This entire gamut is covered. All possible imaginations of arche, all possible theories related to the number of arches are covered already from 0 to infinity. That is the range. So I am going to give you a kind of landscape of the theories, or the landscape of this thought on arche, which has spawned the Western as well as Eastern philosophy. When I mean Western, when I say Western, I mean particularly the Greek thought, and when I say Eastern, I mean particularly the Indic thought. There must be, and there are, many more theories in various other cultures which thought about this question, but we are not going to look at all of them. This is mainly to give you a kind of a landscape of the thought and the range of arches people have thought about, to see how big it is and how vast it is. So the first number, obviously, which we start with is like 0. So there was someone called Nagarjunacharya. He was a Buddhist philosopher, and he is known for starting a new school within Buddhism called Madhyamika school. It is called the middle path, the way of middle path. And you might be knowing, some of you might be knowing Nagarjun Sagar or Nagarjun Konda, which is named after him because he stayed there. It is hardly 3 hours from here. This Madhyamik school is also known as Sunyatavad. We'll actually get back to this a little later because this is the most difficult one to understand. Here in CEH, we believe that out of all the schools, all the philosophical schools existing in the world today, the most complex and difficult school to understand is Buddhism. And usually it is said that all the varieties of isms which one can find in Western philosophy, one can find all those in Indian tradition as well. And within Indian tradition, within Buddhism, one can find again all those isms, because Buddhism has developed into such a complex being that there are so many sects within Buddhism where you can again find all these isms. As much variety as you can find in the Western philosophy, as within Indian tradition as well, that same amount of variety you can find within one school called Buddhism itself. Buddhism is so complex, it's so wide as well as so complex. It's the most difficult one to understand, and within Buddhism this is probably the most difficult to understand. Like, how can something come from nothing? That kind of thing. So, Sunyatavad is something like that. Not exactly that, but it is close to that. So, how can one understand Rk to be 0? That's a very important question. That's a very difficult thing. It's like understanding the concept of 0 itself. The way it is difficult to understand the concept of 0 in mathematics, it is difficult to understand Nagarjuna's theory in ontology. Like, how do we understand 0? How does 0 add any value at all? It's probably the most difficult thing to understand in mathematics and probably the most significant discovery in mathematics, which the world owes to India. That 0 was sort of invented or discovered by Indians. That's a great thing and that's a very difficult thing. It's not an easy thing. How to understand 0 is a very tough thing. It's a philosophically tough thing. So we'll come back to this later, after we look at other schools. Then there are people who said the number of Rk in the world are only 1. Here when one says that Rk is only 1, it can be understood in two ways. One is that there is only one type of Rk, but there are many instances of such a type. That is one way to understand monism. So when Rk is 1, one can call those schools as monist schools, which say that there is only one fundamental, constitutional as well as organizational principle of the universe. It's a basic instinct to think that there is something out of which everything else has come. Also, there is something which is ordering the entire world. So this something can be one or many. Those who said one, they are monists. So within monism, there are two kinds. Those who say that there is only one type of Rk, but there are many instances of such an Rk. They follow qualitative monism, but quantitative pluralism. Like when we go through examples, you will understand. And those who say there is not only one type of Rk, but only one such an Rk, one instance of such a type. Now there is no difference between type and instance here, or type and token. Token is every particular instance of a given type. It's like, suppose we have 1 rupee coins. There can be many coins of that type. So every coin is a separate token, but all of them are 1 rupee coins. So that's what makes them similar. But every coin has an independent existence of its own. That's what makes it unique. So this is like type token distinction. So the first class of people follow qualitative monism, are those who propose qualitative monism but quantitative pluralism, and the second class of people are those who propose qualitative as well as quantitative monism, that there is not only one type of Rk, but there is only one such Rk in the entire universe. There is no other instance or token of that Rk. There is only one. That is only one Rk and one type. There is no type also now, only one Rk, only one such Rk. It's a unique piece in the entire universe. It's like that. So, if you look at the first class of people, the first one is someone who we all might have heard at some point of time or other, about whom we all have heard at some point of time or other, particularly given the atomic theory in science. It is also said that some of the ideas for atoms or atomic theory in science are traced back to the atomic theory of Democritus, though the idea of atom in science and the idea of atom suggested by Democritus are quite different. Now we find that the so-called atom in science is actually splittable. That is, one can still see further parts of it like electrons, neutrons, protons, etc. But atom, as proposed by Democritus, is the most fundamental indivisible unit of universe. Atom, by its definition, its etymology, means that which cannot be cut or that which cannot be split. So Democritus was a Greek philosopher who, for the first time, imagined universe to be composed of infinite number of atoms. but all of them are qualitatively one. All of them belong to one type only, but there are many of them. It's not only one atom, but many atoms of only one type. But they differ only in quantitative ways, only in degree, like their size, shape, like some of them are circular, some of them are spherical, some of them are squarish, some of them are, they have teeth, some of them have hooks so that they can hold on to each other to form holes as a whole object. So he imagined varieties of atoms, but only differing in these features, but otherwise they all belong to one type. And he believed that entire universe, material, non-material, portions of world, all of them constituted fully of these kind of atoms. So this is one example of qualitative monism but quantitative pluralism. Another example of this type is from Indian tradition, from a school called Charvak school. They believe that entire universe is made up of matter. There is only one substance in the entire universe called matter. And whatever we see is only formations or reconfigurations of matter. It is very close to the modern day materialism, where it is said that entire universe is fundamentally reducible to matter, including our mind, our feelings, our emotions, everything can be reduced to matter. How? All these, the so-called consciousness itself is an epiphenomenon of matter. It's a special outcome when some material atoms come into a particular configuration called brain. When that happens, something called consciousness is given rise to. That's how modern science explains consciousness. So Charvak people were also someone like that. They also believed that entire universe is constituted of matter. So they also believed in one kind, one type of substance, which is matter. And then we have Leibniz, the famous mathematician who is known for the invention of calculus. Though actually Leibniz and Newton both invented calculus independently, the notations for calculus which we use today are that of Leibniz. And Leibniz was not only a mathematician, but he was a polymath. He was a philosopher, he was an engineer, he was an advocate, many things. So he came up with a theory which is called monadology, where he said that entire universe is composed of potentially infinite number of monads, where every monad is windowless. Imagine it like this. Imagine a kind of a net of diamonds, a configuration of diamonds or mirrors. Let's imagine mirrors, a configuration of spherical mirrors or some shape, we don't know what the shape is. A configuration of mirrors where every mirror reflects every other mirror except itself, and it reflects itself only through its reflection in other mirrors. It doesn't reflect itself directly. It cannot reflect itself directly anyway. So